When you sit down to enjoy your favorite musical artist, you may find yourself thinking about the story that they're telling. Or maybe you're dazzled by their playing and you're wishing you could do the same. Or maybe you're just happy to be carried away by the music and not think about anything. Sometime, though, you might spare a thought for the person who captured that performance. My guest has been doing this work for more than 3 decades. He's the founder of Champaign's legendary Pogo Studios, where he made more than 1,000 recordings with a wide range of musicians. He now makes his home in Nashville, where he teaches audio engineering at the Blackbird Academy. He is also a musician. Since 1980, he's played bass with Captain Rat and the Blind Rivets. And I'm very pleased to welcome to Illinois Pioneers, Mark Ral. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you, Dave. I'm really pleased to be here.
We really appreciate it. I understand that the beginning of this recording business, at least for you, was when you were 8. Your parents gave you a little tape recorder?
Yes. I think for Christmas I got a little battery-powered tape machine that had a built-in microphone. It was tethered. It had an on-off switch on it. 3-inch tape reels. And I would spend hours recording things, playing them back, flipping the reels, playing them backwards, cutting them up with safety scissors, taping them back together, speeding it up, slowing it down, and laughing, which is pretty much what I do every day now, except people pay me money to do it sometimes.
So you did everything in terms of playing around with the sound that you possibly could, mechanically, by playing it backwards, forwards, splicing it, editing the way we did in the old days.
And still techniques we use now.
So what sort of things did you record?
Oh, mostly babbling. Weirdly, I found the tapes lately. I haven't had the nerve to transfer them. I guess we'll find out.
The first studio, and we'll talk about Pogo, and I think that a lot of people know about Pogo having been in downtown Champaign for a long time. But before that, you did have a studio, a place that was in an old house in Urbana?
The corner of Clark and Busey. I ran across a fellow named Peter Penner, who had a studio in Southern Illinois. When I met him, all the recording equipment was in storage, and he was putting a group of sort of ex-hippies together to put together a kind of recording collective. And he was getting ready to take a solo bicycle trip from Dublin to Morocco, which he then did. And so we just took what we had and wired it together and put it in this little house that we were renting for $100 a month, and called it a studio. You know, knocked holes in the walls, put windows in the internal walls, and all the things you need to do. And all the other partners had electrical engineering degrees and jobs, and I had a wacky liberal arts science degree and a number of small jobs, and so I got elected to run the studio and deal with the clients and do the sessions, and I've been doing it ever since.
So how, in that first studio, this was Faithful Sound?
Faithful Sound, named after a Todd Rundgren song.
How much did you charge for an hour of recording time?
Our initial rate was $4.50 an hour.
Pretty good deal.
Not bad.
Pretty good deal. Considering now you probably, I don't know, what's the going rate now?
It varies. Unfortunately, the going rate for recording studio is less than it was in the 70s. Everything else has gotten more expensive, but due to the prevalence of home recording, really studios charge less. So the current Pogo rate is $55 an hour.
And that struck me as extraordinarily affordable, what you were charging at Pogo. I would expect that if you would go to some place and you were some sort of big name performer, you'd be paying hundreds of dollars an hour at least, if not more.
Well, it's an interesting dynamic from a business point of view. You know, people have alternatives. They can record at home or they can record in smaller places for less money, and they tend to make the judgment of whether they're going to record with you on a hourly basis rather than a per project basis. So it's something that I think my industry has not done a good job of defending, which is the viability and need for professional recording studios. And people don't necessarily realize all the things that they get from being in a professional environment.
Well, when you started doing this seriously, and I don't know if that was in as far back as the Faithful Sound days, or you even want to take it back further, what sort of reward do you think there was for you? What about it excited you that made you want to do that?
Everything. Really everything. I remember when I first set foot in a professional studio. We'd been doing lots of home recordings. You know, when my parents would go on vacation, I think all my contemporaries would have a big party, and we would turn the house into a recording studio. You know, just put borrowed and rented gear in there. But I remember when I first walked into a real recording studio called Silver Dollar Studios in Urbana, and when I walked in there, the angels sang and a light came down from the heavens, and I just realized this is a wonderful environment and everything about it is exciting. And I still feel the same way every time I walk into a studio now.
Is it that, because I think what people don't really realize, and if they think about it at all, is that the person who's doing that kind of work, this goes way beyond turning knobs, or even setting up a microphone that an artist will stand in front of. Ideally, there's a collaborative thing that goes on here that then the end product should be better because you were there than if you hadn't been involved.
Absolutely. I think it's almost a disservice to our job that we're called engineers, because we're not really engineers in the sense of somebody who designs bridges or, fixes things. Maybe a little bit more in the sense of somebody who runs a train. But there's so many different skills involved, and really the knob twiddling and the microphone setting are an expression of that. So it's a collaborative art, so we have to work with other artists to try and realize their vision. And there's so many aspects to it, and it's such a subtle and multifaceted job, because we have to know the technology, we have to communicate well, we have to be able to listen really well, and we have to deal with the psychology of interaction and of art. So it's really an endlessly fascinating and endlessly detailed job. Yeah.
I'm interested in having you talk maybe just a little bit about your family.
Mm-hmm.
I know that your dad was a mathematician, your mom was a journalist. Tell me about them.
Well, my father was I think he was a true Renaissance man. He was a research mathematician, which is really one step removed from a poet, I would say. That, it's at that point you might think mathematics is more of a dry problem-solving thing, but this is really leaps of creativity, and a true scientist. So it was really fascinating to be around scientists, many of whom were eccentric, if you can imagine that, which is good practice for being in the music business. Mm-hmm. And my mother was a writer. She wrote feature articles for the newspapers, for the Champaign Courier, and then later the News Gazette. And she really was fascinated by people and interested in their stories. And it took me a long time to realize that if I put those things together, science and human interest, you get record making, right? We're taking sort of somewhat technical, but we're really taking portraits in sound of these different personalities that we're lucky enough to work with.
Well, I was interested in one of the things that I read where you said you thought that you realized at some point that there were some real parallels between what your mom did as a writer, as a journalist, and what you were doing in the studio.
Mm-hmm. It's portraiture, and we have so many tools that we can use in making these portraits. We have to be very careful in how we portray someone and what they are thinking, and it's really their soul in many ways. We're in a position of great trust, but we also have to work with the artists, and sometimes we maybe know what's best about them more than they do, and they're the things that they might want us to take out or fix, and especially these days where we have the technical tools to change and edit and fix so many things. Sometimes we have to be their conscience and an objective voice to help them express the best parts of themselves.
I'm sure this is very difficult when you're dealing with people who maybe have a strong vision of what they want, maybe have strong egos. You're kind of a soft-spoken guy. How is it if you have somebody who they say, look, this is what I want, just do it, and you're thinking, well, we could do this a better way. How do you talk with them about what you think might be a better way?
Well, again, it's a very subtle communication process, and I will make suggestions, but I'll say these are only my suggestions. If I feel strongly about something, I might argue with them, but ultimately it is their record, and we are there to serve them, and also to serve the music. In some ways, I think of my clients as being sort of secondary to the music, and so you have to treat them very well, but I think we're all kind of conduits for the art and the music itself. But it is very subtle and very complicated. I think in some ways, if you can provide alternatives and say, what if we tried this, or what do you think of that? I also think it's important in the process of record making to never say no. If they come in and they say, I have this idea, and we might think that will never work. We could argue with them about it for half an hour, or we could try it for 5 minutes. And then if it doesn't work, they'll hopefully realize it. And if it does work, then we'll be surprised. And there's, no matter how long I've been making records, or any of us have been making records, the artists know their art the best. So we're really there to serve their vision.
So as a musician now, you started playing when you were 12?
Yes.
Is that right? And did you start with the bass?
I did, which is fairly unusual. Many bass players are guitar players who switched. But I was always fascinated by bass, just the sound of it. I mean, I've always been fascinated by sound and music and just about everything else. But it's actually traceable to a number of specific events. One was I was going to a Marx Brothers Film Festival at the Thunderbird Theater in Urbana. There was a guitar store called Axe in Hand. And I was walking in, and I looked to my left, and there was this beautiful shining object in the window with, as far in my recollection, and again, a beam of light shining down and angels singing around it. And I was mesmerized, and I just walked in, and there was Skip, who influenced many people. And I was, 11 or 12, and I said, "What is that?" That, young man, is a Fender Precision bass. Wow, it's the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. And beautiful object. So that was one. The other was I went to the Howdy Hop at Uni High, which is the first dance of the semester. And there was a band playing there called Headband. And I just remember the bass vibrating everything, my shoes, and so forth. I thought that was really cool. And that's actually the band that later became the band that I've been in for the last 34 years, Captain Rat and Blind Rivets.
All right. The precision bass is, I think, for a lot of bass players, people who play electric bass, that's the gold standard and has been for a long, long time. That's a big, heavy instrument. When did you actually get your first electric bass? And was it a precision bass?
It wasn't. It took some time to find a good Fender. My first bass was a rented Electra bass, and I had a Kalamazoo amplifier, which is the size of a cigar box, or maybe a little larger. I thought I was, John Entwistle. And started taking lessons right away. But I don't know when I got my first Fender, probably 1975 or something like that. But it is an amazing instrument. It's a kind of triumph of industrial design. It's really an unimprovable instrument, sort of like the violin. It fits well when you're sitting, it fits well when you're standing, it's balanced, it sounds great. So Leo Fender was part of that 50s era where people really were making amazing products, amazing cars, and everything looked great and worked great.
Yeah, well, that's why I suppose, in guitar design, I suppose people have tried to do everything you possibly could do with a lot of strange results, and maybe the players are very idiosyncratic. One person likes one instrument and somebody likes another instrument, but it seems like that instrument, that particular bass, and the other, and Stratocasters, Telecasters, and Les Pauls. People always want them, and they probably always will want them. And the old instruments are always going to be hugely in demand, and they're never going to lose their value.
It's true. They sort of accidentally turned into good investments, and also, there's the aspect that we all have our heroes, and so to be able to play something that they played makes us feel a little bit closer to that, although that's really just the tool.
Yeah. Let's come back to the studio and to talk a little bit about how you get then from Faithful Studios to Pogo.
Well, we had Faithful Sound for 3 years, and then I moved to a loft in downtown Champaign. Took a year off. This was at the time that my band was really playing. I think we played 250 shows that year. Just a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I was mainly playing, and so I took about a year off from recording, and then I got the urge to do it again. And we were living in this building in downtown Champaign, and the ground floor was available. So I decided to start converting that, and it took a long time. I was happy to have the time to envision it first, and really to be able to spend a lot of time thinking about what it would be like before we put it in. And then we did, and by then we had slowly built up the equipment. We always bought the equipment in cash, never took out any loans to do any of it. We just started with what Peter had, and just when we'd have, we would empty our pockets and go to Huey's and get whatever we could, duct tape and nails and things we needed, and we just really built it up from almost nothing to what became a quite nice middle-sized professional recording studio.
And a place that really had, I think, a good reputation, certainly was well known among local musicians, and you have had the chance to work with people who are indeed household names. And I think that I also read somewhere that you said that you actually never advertised, and you never had to, because the reputation of the place seemed to spread and people knew about it. They knew where it was, even though there wasn't a big sign that said, here it is.
Yeah. Well, that's really the only way that a service like that will succeed, is by word of mouth. I mean, the advertising that we did, which was basically a Yellow Pages ad, brought in a lot of interesting people with reel-to-reel tapes of Christmas 1964 and, you know, acetate recordings of GIs and so forth, but not really that many clients. The clients listen to other people's records, and they go on the basis of what they've heard and their experience. And the other thing is, having been in business for as long as I have, you know, you work with a band, and if they have a good experience, pretty certainly within a couple of years that will split into 4 bands, and then you have more clients. So yeah. I've been very lucky to get to do something that is just endlessly fascinating, and where I've never felt like I'm working.
Yeah. I don't know that I've been in that many studios, a couple I guess, and I've seen pictures of various studios, and they're all very different places. And it all depending on, you know, the aesthetic sense or design sense of whoever it is that said, well, in addition to the acoustics, there are certain things you have to have. Mm-hmm. You want to have a kind of a feel to it. And some, actually, that I've seen pictures of are remarkably sterile-looking places that can produce very evocative music. So you sort of wonder, well, how exactly does that happen? What about the place and contributes to that? Or maybe another way of saying is, well, how do you make a place that's warm and inviting, where people are going to feel comfortable, where they will do their best work?
Yeah, it's essentially important. Just the feel of it, the vibe of it is really critical. And it's one of the things that fascinates me about the studio world. I get to take my students to all sorts of different studios, and each of them is an expression of the personality of the person who has it. And I'm just fascinated by the use of space and the lighting and the color, you know, paint colors and so forth. So it's a little bit of everything, and everyone has their own vision of the ultimate environment to make music in. So I really love that about the process.
Well, when you were designing your own place, how did you approach that?
Well, I was, as I said, I was lucky enough to be able to really think about it for a long time beforehand. And some of it happened through a process of evolution and just moving things around. And I'm also a great accumulator. Accumulator of instruments and equipment that all have their own story. So it's partly a matter of thought and partly a matter of a kind of evolution, which I'm getting to do again now that we're putting the studio in Nashville.
That's one thing I want to make sure that we at least mention for people who are mourning Pogo. It is a loss for Champaign-Urbana, for downtown Champaign, but you have now settled in Nashville, and you are setting up there, and you will again be doing recording work when you have the opportunity there. And we were talking about it before we started. I think you decided that it couldn't be called anything other than Pogo.
That's correct. Yeah, I've been thinking of calling it Pogo of the South or Pogo del Sud or something like that. But we bought Steve Earle's old place, and it has a house and a fairly large area, and then a full-size professional studio that was built from the ground up. And so last Tuesday we put the Pogo equipment in there, and now I'm starting to envision again and see how it's going to be. But it's a little bit larger than the Champaign place. It has more isolation rooms, which is something that I wanted to have here. And something else that makes me extremely happy is that the people who bought the Pogo building in downtown Champaign are putting a recording studio in there, so it will continue as a studio, and that really makes me glad. I would hate to see it turn into another bar or another clothing store or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's really wonderful when I think of all the music that's gone in there and all the experiences that we had in there. It's nice to see that continue with young people.
I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about the mechanism of recording, something about what happens and the various pieces here. But one thing, again, I think if people have seen pictures of studios, of the control room side, they know that in studios they all have enormous control boards that have 1 million knobs on them. I mean, I have any idea what those things do, but you say, oh, recording studio, yes, I know what that looks like. And for people who work in studios, there's a lot of mystery that attaches and special mojo that attaches to the boards. Tell me about the one that you've got.
It's a fantastic thing. It's an API console. API is one of the earlier manufacturers of recording consoles. They made them since 1967. But this one was custom built by a guy named Frank DiMidio. And there's very little information. I can't even figure out how many of these were made, maybe 20 or 30 of these consoles ever. DiMidio was the chief engineer for Radio Havana, as far as I can tell, before Castro. And he came to San Francisco where he started custom building mixing consoles for studios. So he built studios for consoles for a guy named Wally Hyder, who recorded a lot of the San Francisco scene music. And my console was custom built for Fantasy Studios in Berkeley. It was in their Studio C, so it was mainly used, as far as I can tell, for Creedence records.
Creedence Clearwater Revival. Their music was recorded, ran through that board.
Through that board. And then when they left Fantasy, they had DiMidio build them an exact replica. So there's another one that's identical, which is interesting because they're custom built. And in 1970, when a house cost maybe $30,000, this thing was $105,000. And there is nothing better sounding on the planet. There are some equally good sounding boards, but it's just the sound of it is fantastic, mainly because it's simple. It makes it operationally difficult because it doesn't have all the features of a modern console, but you don't need as many features if it sounds great to begin with. And one of the things I really like about it is that it is, it's light gray. It's a kind of a battleship gray. So much of that stuff is black, which makes the knobs hard to read, and it's part of what I call the Darth Vader school of industrial design. And I like something that's a little bit lighter and feels more creative in that way.
Well, another thing I wanted to make sure that I mentioned, because you did talk about the fact that you are reconstituting Pogo there at your house in Nashville. So Pogo lives, long live Pogo.
Yes.
Something else, though, that I think that is pretty cool is that the Sousa Archives and Center for American Music, which is part of the U of I Library, has acquired 2 collections of material that document the history of Pogo. So they are going to hold on to all of this stuff that you recorded there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's a lot of stuff, and so it's nice of them to keep it in catalog and keep it in good shape. But it is a documentary. You know, this. I hope that people in Champaign-Urbana realize what a magnificent community this is, and the fact that the music scene here is more than a scene, it's a community. And there are a lot of places that have music scenes, but this truly is a community where if you go to a show, much of the audience is comprised of other musicians who support whoever's playing. Everybody plays with each other and works together. It's just the level of talent that's here and the level of communication and so forth is phenomenal. It's just the right size place, and we have all the ingredients that we need to make a viable and fantastic place. So I'm glad to have been able to play a part in it and to have some documents to leave.
Yeah. Well, as great an opportunity being able to go to Blackbird is for you, it must have also been bittersweet for sure to be leaving this place where you had pretty much lived all your life and had built this studio and had this long association with the band that you're in. It must have been hard.
It is in a way, and but I'm still back. My sister and nieces are here, and my band is still here. And although I quit my university job and closed down my studio and sold the building that we owned and so forth, you know, I consider this to be my hometown, and it was bittersweet, but I'm so excited about getting to be there, and I'm happy to embark on an adventure at this advanced age, and to be able to explore a new place and get to make new friends, and plan to keep all the others.
We're almost at the point where we're going to have to finish. Maybe just one other thing that I guess really struck me that you said in an interview, and again it goes back to this idea of, you know, who are you and how is this place that you make an extension of you. You said, ideally a business should be an extension of the person driving it. And I suppose that could be for good or for ill. But if you think, say you think about the studio that you built and now that you're rebuilding, how would you say that Pogo is an extension of you?
Well, for better or worse, it's this compendium of just all the things that I'm interested in, which turn out to be an awful lot of things. So I'm really interested in everything, and always have been. And so there's a little bit of that, and hopefully it creates an environment that is conducive to people's creativity and exploration. But it's on the other side, it's also maybe too much of an expression of my cluttered brain. But all the things I'm interested in, and I find that I'm really, I studied literature, and I'm really interested in people and their uniqueness and their qualities and their character. And I think it's useful to be in a place that has all of those qualities, and hopefully that brings out those aspects of the people that I get to work with.
Well, that's a good place for us to stop.
Thank you so
and
much.
We must. Thank you very much for talking with us.
It's a great pleasure.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks. I also want to say, too, to you folks who are watching, thanks very much for being with us. And next time, join us for another edition of Illinois Pogo.